I'd like to read Chapter 5 for you now, from La Jolla Story, Part 1. This chapter is important because it introduces Nora Chang to the reader. Nora Chang's Chinese American and is the office manager at the Wind & Sea Residential Hotel in La Jolla, California. Her academic background is in science. She has a degree in biology from UCSD in La Jolla, and her dream is to work in research at the Salk Institute. But after graduation, although Salk was accepting applications, there were no job openings there. Nora saw an ad in the local paper for an office position at Wind & Sea Residential Hotel and thought it might be a good job until she could find employment at Salk Institute. When the general manager of the hotel interviewed Nora, he was so impressed by her looks and personality that he hired her on the spot and soon made her the office manager. The reader learns in this chapter what type of person Nora is and what she expects from someone who wants to marry her. I'll read the chapter now. Having experienced an almost sleepless night, Nora Chang, the hotel office manager, didn't hear the 20-second alarm from the Casio on her wrist. It was her day off. She planned to be up, showered, and dressed by 11 a.m. in order to be ready when Barry, her Taiwanese boyfriend, arrived to take her for brunch. There would be no brunch or lunch, and she knew it. But Barry didn't. It was now 10:15, so she decided to skip the shower, remembering she'd taken one last night. Perhaps that was one reason she had not slept well. It was not the main reason, however. Lying there, looking up at the ceiling and feeling like a zombie, she pondered her dilemma. Not the scarcity of time between now and 11 a.m., but a categorical decision she'd made during the night, the repercussions from which would predictably haunt her for many years. Although Nora was fatigued from tossing and thinking, the composition of her finely sculptured features with zero makeup was a work of art, one that any man would love to see next to him upon awakening. Her silky black waist-length hair was elegantly fanned across the pillow, as if prepared by a meticulous artist, ready with a palette, brush, and canvas. A powder blue mini nightgown discreetly veiled her voluptuous body, customarily clothed, especially around the office, in somewhat staid, business-like attire. By nature, a self-disciplined creature, she sprang from the bed and prepared herself to face Barry. At 10:55, she was waiting in a cream polo shirt and blue jeans. Not unexpectedly, he arrived 90 seconds early. Barry and a college chum had started a partnership 2.5 years ago, installing home security systems, a system that was designed by Barry. And they've done quite well. It wasn't necessary for Barry to take off today. He was the code owner and could simply rearrange his schedule. When she opened her front door, Barry had a reasonably cheerful look on his face. But as soon as he saw hers, everything changed, and nothing would ever be the same. "What's wrong?" he asked in a masculine baritone voice. His physical appearance left little doubt he could probably defend himself capably in a karate match. "Come in, please. I didn't sleep well." She closed the door after he entered. "Why don't you sit here on the sofa, Barry?" He did. She pulled an upholstered chair to a spot directly in front of him and sat facing him. "Jesus Christ, what the hell's going on?" No vestige of his native Mandarin was detectable. "Did you get raped?" It took a couple of seconds for that to register. She exhaled sharply. "It's interesting you put it that way." Very quickly, with anger in his voice. "What are you talking about?" Just as quickly, transcending his anger, she shot back. "Don't talk to me like that." Forcing himself to sit back on the sofa, as if relaxed. "My God, Nora, will you try to put yourself in my place for a second? I came here in a perfectly good mood. In fact, a great mood. And you greet me at the door as if you just witnessed a mass murder. You expect me to sit here and behave like a poised psychiatrist, I guess." "No, I haven't been physically raped." The words came out emphatically. "But somehow I do have this feeling of being raped emotionally." "By me, for God's sake?" "In a way, yes." "Oh, this is bullshit, Nora." Now his anger was tinged with disgust. "We've been going together for, 9-10 months? If you're not convinced by now that I'm in love with you, crap, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You made it crystal clear from the beginning there would be no sex, and I've complied with your wishes. But you have to know that I love you." "Love me?" Pausing long enough to mentally confirm what she'd said. "Yes, I love you. But what about you?" "Me?" With disbelief. "What about me? I don't know what you mean." "Do you love yourself?" A look of astonishment came over her face. "What the hell's that got to do with it?" "It has everything to do with it, Barry. Have you forgotten that you have a degree in biochemistry?" "Oh, shit, here comes the $5 lecture on how I wasted my education. I can get that from my dad, baby." "And you're going to get that from your dad, baby, when he comes from Taiwan in a few weeks. You're going to get a great deal more than that." "Well," he was noticeably squirming a bit, "I'll deal with that when he gets here," sarcastically. "Sure you will. Mañana. I think you've got some Mexican blood in you." "You know what really gets into my skin, Barry?" Not waiting for an answer. "We had physics together, remember? I worked my butt off to get an A-, frantically taking notes and spending long nights on homework. I'd look up from my classroom desk throughout the semester and see you hardly taking a note. I bet even Dr. Pratt was thinking, I'm going to get that SOB on the final exam. And you made the highest grade in the class. It comes so easily for you, and I don't think you appreciate your own brain. You take it for granted. You're sitting on your ass intellectually. You haven't got a clue about your future. Your parents have spent a small fortune on your education, definitely when you consider transportation expenses from Taiwan. And you're screwing around installing alarm systems. Barry was stunned. Never had he seen this basically sweet, warm, understanding young lady, considered by his strict Chinese parents to be the perfect candidate for their only son's proposal in marriage, so agitated. The most difficult part of all for Barry was that the words coming out of Nora's mouth were all ringing true, based on the limited information Nora had. He knew, however, that she didn't have all the facts. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she exclaimed. "You should be in medical research or some related field. You should be doing something significant, something worthwhile to advance the knowledge of mankind." During a short pause, Barry could see tears collecting around her eyes. She continued, "When I was 5 years old, my parents gave me a brown and white rat terrier. Trixie was his name. The smartest little guy I've ever known in my life. He tried to do everything I did. He'd make these funny dog sounds, trying to talk, and I could see in his eyes that he was trying as hard as he could to verbally communicate with me. Sometimes he came very close to saying something. I was coloring with my crayons once on the carpet, and he picked up one of the crayons in his mouth, not to chew on it or eat it, but he was actually attempting to use it on a coloring book. If he had hands and feet, been able to walk upright and speak like a human being, Trixie would have gone to school with me and probably been a top student. It was in his eyes. You could see it. He wanted to excel. He wanted to improve himself. It showed on his face. She sat there in silence for 4 or 5 seconds, looking straight into Barry's face. "I don't see any of that in your face, Barry. When I look into your eyes, I see desire, but it's sexual desire. That's why I said I feel like I've been emotionally raped. I guess as we've dated and I've come to know you better, that somehow I've expected more from you than you're able to give. I'm terribly disappointed. Maybe I expect too much, but I'm not sorry about that. I set high goals for myself, and I expect the same zeal for excellence in others, particularly someone with whom I may spend the rest of my life. As a student in high school in the 11th grade, despite my obvious Chinese exterior, I was chosen to play Emily in a play called Our Town. Have you seen it or read it? No. Well, you should. Every human being alive should see it or read it, preferably both. I think it's the most important play ever written. Thornton Wilder wrote it. It was the most wonderful and rewarding experience of my life. We rehearsed the play for about 5 weeks. Then there were 4 performances over 2 weekends, a Friday and a Saturday night each weekend. I wish there had been 100 performances, just to hear the dialogue that many times, and to have the honor of portraying one of the main characters and actually trying to breathe life into the part. It was an experience I'll never forget. There's no scenery or props. The actors and the audience have to use their imagination. It's so simple and yet so powerful. It's about life, humanity, and death, and more importantly, about the appreciation of life. During the play, some of the characters die. My character, Emily, was one of them. There are scenes in the cemetery in which the dead characters talk to each other and reminisce about the people and things they miss and the things they wish they had done in their life and didn't. Emily is permitted to return to her home for one day, her birthday. Her family can't see her because she's dead, but she walks among them and looks into their beautiful faces and wonders why they don't take the time to look at each other more. She talks about the beauty of a tree and the wonderful smell of food on the table. Nora begins to sob. Very few of us appreciate any of those things. We take it all for granted. Like you, Barry. You've got the brains, the looks, the personality. You've got it all. And you're doing absolutely nothing with it. Nothing. Just gliding and floating. But you're floating in the wrong direction. You've permitted yourself to become a pissant. And I don't want to wake up 20 years from now and roll over in the bed and see you next to me and realize I'm married to a pissant. Quietly, smoothly, and quickly, Barry got up and walked out of Nora's apartment, out of her life. Her words had cut him too deeply. She didn't know all the facts, but he didn't care to bring them up at this point. It was too late. He took care not to slam the door, but he made sure it was shut completely, with finality. Her sobs became pronounced, and she began to tremble. She heard his car start and the sound of it pulling away. Sitting there in the chair, tears streaming down her face, she knew that although what she had done amounted to emotionally killing Barry, her genuine rationale was to wake him up and propel him back into the intellectual domain over which, with his natural talent and educational qualifications, he could, if not prevail, at least contribute meaningful influence. In her mind, the question of whether she still loved Barry, was not unanswerable. The true response, and the truth was something she always sought, was that she had never really loved him in the first place. He would occupy a special place in her heart. He had been part of her life experience. But the truth, her interpretation of it, which stared into her face throughout last night's insomnia, was that she refused to tolerate life with Barry. And even if she did, tolerance is not love, or is it? Perhaps because of her youth and lack of experience, she didn't or couldn't recognize the possible fallacious logic in arriving at her version of the truth. Either wisdom or empirical knowledge would readily validate the extreme difficulty sometimes associated with uncovering the truth, because it comes in layers and levels and in order to discover its essence, the seeker must possess the patience and perseverance of an archaeological sleuth. There's a great deal of digging and dusting and analyzing involved. The veneer can be cannily deceptive, and truth itself, if found, is often elusive and slippery during the process of unclothing it for observation in its naked form. The truth was, in this case, Nora gave up on Barry somewhere between the first and second layer. If Nora, trembling and sobbing, had gone to one of her windows to watch Barry's departure from her apartment, she would have seen him drive away in a sparkling new BMW, for which he'd paid cash. His intention had been to present the BMW to Nora as a gift, an expression of his love. That would be Barry's secret forever. 10 days after the abortive brunch date, the local San Diego Union Tribune carried a feature article on Barry's business with photographs of both partners. It revealed how, because of their backgrounds in science, they came up with a rather innovative home security system that was overwhelmingly popular and simple to operate. In only a few months, sales had skyrocketed. Now that the patent had been approved, their plan was to go both national and international with franchises. Then, hopefully, following a year or so of continued success, they would sell the patent and their business, using the money to continue their education in the medical field without relying on their parents as they had in the past. Nora seldom read the business section of the newspaper, but Barry's front page picture caught her eye. When she finished reading the article, she wept for at least 1 hour. That's the end of chapter 5. All of my novels are on Amazon. I hope you'll consider reading them.